Awesome. Well, James, thank you again for joining today's podcast on Meet the Stakeholders. You're a stakeholder, and one of the things I want to do is I want to have you kind of introduce yourself and how you how introduce yourself and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me here virtually, Giovanni. My name is James. I use he, him pronouns. I am starting off with like the non-work related stuff. Born and raised New Yorker, still here. Fingers crossed for the rest of my life. I'm a cat dad, so if you do see me look down, it's because I'm trying to protect my ankles from the little fur kids. And I am a huge like video game comic nerd outside of the my 9 to 5. On the work tip, I am currently the learning community lead over at Schoolhouse, a nonprofit that was started by Sal Khan from from Khan Academy, focused on really bringing like high quality peer to peer tutoring to learners and students across the globe. So we are working on some really fun and interesting initiatives there, and my work really lies in working with our community, our ecosystem of volunteers, and really thinking through the lens of community, how can we build more user empathy internally? How can that translate into our structured programming and the way that we approach building and scaling? And in addition to that, when looking at like business outcomes, how what role really scoping out, defining, and tangibly figuring out what role community plays in the learner experience, the tutor experience, the volunteer experience, and ultimately how that boils down to um, business outcomes such as like NPS, CSAT, and retention, particularly on our tutor side, and then even attrition on our volunteer side.
Nice. And I see the cat behind you there.
Oh, speaking of, we made an appearance.
Yeah. Do you have two or just one cat?
Fun fact: do you see that little bump in the bed? That is the second
Yeah.
cat.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's one cat, and that's the second one right there.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It must be a handful.
Yeah, um, we're good. We're good with no kids right now. We just stick with the cats.
Nice. So one of the things that when I found out about is that you broke into tech. You used to be a teacher, right?
Yeah. So yeah. I after undergrad, oh gosh, I was like a really aloof. I'm still to an extent an aloof person. In undergrad, I was pretty aloof, and I studied English with a focus in creative writing, which most people tell you, or at least maybe people were saying it, but I just didn't hear it. Um, but that is a really tough industry to break into. So I kind of just didn't really know what I wanted to do post undergrad. Um, and I was on the train one day and I saw like an advertisement for a teaching fellowship. So I kind of applied, not with a not without any kind of thought behind it. Like I didn't have any like expectation. Didn't think anything will come of it. And I got accepted to it. So yeah, I was a teacher for about taught English ELA for about 2.5 years.
And so from transitioning from education to tech, that's like a huge. I think that's a really huge achievement. Did you have any strategies like mindsets that helped you kind of be competitive in the tech market? How did you navigate, the industry challenges and things like that?
Yeah, that one is. I have a bit of a interesting transition. The first company, Consensus, which is where we met, um, that I worked for. My sister recruited me. She's actually the founder of that company. So she recruited me while I was in a kind of a transition period post teaching. I did have to still apply for the role. Like I still had to apply for the role and actually get the job and beat out other applicants. But I was effectively asked to apply.
Mhm.
So headhunted in a way. So I think if anybody is headhunted in any way, shape, or capacity, that definitely does give you a leg up. So that definitely helped me in my transition to tech. Um, and it was a fairly like entry level role. So I don't think there was anything particularly there that I did that made me stand out, other than just be a really good like culture add to the already small team. I
Mhm.
think transitioning from there to this role, which is I guess like my second role in tech. I think what really helped me stand out in that application pool, which was very competitive, and I was not headhunted for this role. I did have to seek it out. Um,
Mhm.
I think what really stuck out for me was one, understanding like what I wanted out of my next role. I really sat down with myself and really like wrote down and reflected on, okay, what size company do I want to work for? What kind of culture do I want to be in? What kind of like vertical do I want to be in? Within there, within my skill set, what roles am I comfortable playing? Um, and really just like really narrowing down, like outside of just like culture, where do I want to work? How do I want to work? Who do I want to work with? So this way, I was really spending my time and energy only applying to roles that, like at the onset, there was already like a really strong alignment between my values and mission and their values and mission, which I think really
Mm.
helped me to stand out, uh, not only like through the application but also through the interview process. And with that being said, um, working in like an education related, transitioning back to something education related was important to me.
Mhm.
So this may not be applicable to everybody, but really leaning into that educational background I had, I was finally at a place where that teaching experience that I had, what I got my graduate degree in so many years ago, was now finally applicable again. It was something that could make me really competitive in that market. Um, just like with any, tech, right? I work in like ed tech, fintech. You have all your different types of, beauty tech, all your different martech. I could just
Mhm.
keep going. All your different types of tech. Not everybody who is working in these places or applying for these places actually have the experience of the non-tech aspect of that place, right? Like, I'm on a team of like 11 full-timers, 10, 11 full-timers, and only three of us have actually taught in a classroom before, even though we're creating solutions to almost like disrupt the tutoring industry. So
Mm.
it's an interesting kind of like juxtaposition where that, you applying in a vertical where you have standard experience in but not tech experience in technically, can be a really big W for you, because the competition pool may just be people with tech experience, not
Yeah.
like that vertical's experience. So that is something to definitely highlight. And then the second thing I would just say, the third thing, excuse me, just to like cap it off, is, it sounds super cheesy, but like really authentically like be yourself in those interviews, and really treat them as like a two-way street. I think in my interviews I asked a lot of questions that reflected my values and the type of place I wanted to work at, and I think that for my team and the interviewing managers at the time, that made me a compelling candidate, because I didn't come in on some time where it was like, yes, 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 I'm gonna say yes to everything you want, and I'm gonna do everything you want. It was very much a dialogue and a conversation, and um, I think that did help me stand out amongst the crowd, where I just wasn't like a yes man.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the having the experience. I guess it also depends on the role, right? It's like some roles may not necessarily need that industry experience. Like as for me was like the teacher aspect. I'm assuming that the role that you have right now, having that experience, that education experience is really important. Do you use it on a day-to-day basis?
Well, in my role, I'll like target demographic, mostly high schoolers. So like, I definitely think like having worked with kids, having worked with
Mm,
like young people in the past, um, gives me like a unique kind of perspective, insight into like harnessing the energy of like young folks, and like moving it in like in a direction that's going to be like mission aligned and like aligned to our
mm,
strategic objectives. So I definitely think like that aspect has helped. Um, I think in addition to that, like, I would say like maybe not necessarily in a day-to-day capacity do I use and rely on some of that like background, but I definitely think when it comes to being more user centric, that helps me and enables me. I really do lean on my educational background, my background as an educator, because that
mhm,
allows me to really think about like the players and the stakeholders, in the ecosystem, in a way that doesn't require me necessarily to have to talk to like 50 users to get like a holistic perspective. It allows me to be able to talk to users and not walk away saying like talk to 5 users and this was the insight, so this is the thing. It really allows me to have a more
Yeah.
holistic as somebody who's inside and saw, like, not only saw, experienced, but also heard from peers, just like what some of the issues they faced were. And like just one brief example of that is, we one of our flagship programs are like SAT boot camps. So students can come in, take a SAT boot camp. It's supposed to help them prepare for the SAT and help them get a better score when they take it. So great value for like you if you were taking the SAT, obviously. But what we need to do, or what we're considering rather, when we think about like, okay, well, how do we like get more traction here? And we have a ton of traction with students. We start to consider who are the stakeholders outside of students that are involved in this process. So you're thinking like parents and guardians, guidance counselors, admissions professionals, just to name a few. And I think like one way that I can tap into like my experiences really like and bring to the table is really sharing kind of like some of the stories and anecdotes of what it's like to be a guidance counselor, and like share like some of the realities of like, well, this is like an ideal guidance counselor gig, and this is like maybe the shittiest guidance counselor gig. So when we compare like that breadth of experience, I can rely on my past educational experience to really help kind of almost like segment down which route we want to go. Because if you are in an extremely well-funded school that cares about getting their students into top 50 schools, that's very different messaging, and that's really different messaging, really different positioning, and an inherent value prop here. Whereas if you're a counselor who is, underpaid, your school's under-resourced, you're dealing with like more immediate problems that maybe are like behavioral in the building, our messaging, our positioning, and the value prop we provide exists, but it's completely different. It's two completely different things.
Wow, yeah, I didn't even think about the different schools and where it's located and like the different, I guess, like incomes around that school. That's something I definitely see if you have the experience and background in, even if you don't have tech experience per se, just having that experience when applying for these roles is something really valuable. So I guess really like the approach for people trying to break into tech isn't this like spray and pray, but it's really like your strategy of focusing where your experience and background can be applied, and where you can and how you can be a value add to that company, is really how I guess you broke into tech.
Yeah, and I really think like it sounds super cheesy because I think part of our conversation is going to be about marketing. Like, right, like you when you're working in customer success, excuse me, and working in marketing, you know, finding like the right audience, segmenting your audience, understanding your personas, understanding your ideal customer profile. These are all things that like baseline. That's what you do. That's stuff that you should be doing when you jump in. What historic literature do you have? Let me jump in. Let me update this. Let me review it. Let me audit it. You could do that without any overhead, any guidance, and provide a lot of value to an organization.
Mhm.
I believe that the job search is, if you really are interested in finding a good fit, the job search is a similar kind of format. Like, who is your audience? What is your segment? What value do you provide? Once you get all that down, you can really say, this is how I position myself. This is the messaging I use. And here are like my
Mhm.
unique value props. And I think that's it's still like super competitive out there, but I think folks might be interested in seeing the results that they may get if they take a more targeted approach like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this might be a little like off tangent, but I always wondered why marketers, when applying for jobs, don't use marketing as a tool. I mean, if you think about it, the job search traditionally is outbound, right? Like you're sending out an application, various applications, right? And then there's the interview process and stages,
Mhm.
right? But what about inbound? What about like posting content or even doing like paid ads on social media? Is like having a some kind of picture of you holding a build like not a
Yeah.
billboard, but a poster saying, "Do you need a product marketing manager?" And then just launching that on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I've always wondered why marketers don't market themselves for positions and just do the traditional outbound kind of outreach.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think I would have to send this to you like after because I would have to find it. I think her name is Maria. I'm not too sure. It might start with an M. I have to find it. Um, it was this viral video on LinkedIn, and I may butcher the story, but like the highlights are just like I believe I forget the young lady's name, so excuse me. Um, she was like out of work, couldn't find work, and she worked in marketing. I believe she was a product marketing manager,
Mhm.
and so she just made a video, like she made a video of her resume, but it was so creative and like so thoughtful and so just like fun and funny. Um, and I think like it really spoke to like the types of roles she wanted to land and the types of places she wanted to work at.
Mhm.
And dude, when I say viral, I mean like I think she had job offers like in the comments type viral. Like it was super well done. And I think like especially in this day and age of like people reviewing like thousands of applications for like entry level roles, mid level roles. Like you do really need to try to market yourself and like do something different. I think though, and I think she was a great example of that. I think though, to your point of like why some people don't, I think, and I can really relate to it and empathize. Sometimes you're like applying for work like out of necessity, right? Like you just got laid
Mhm.
off, you got a whack severance package. Um, you have unforeseen debt or expenses come up, so you need to make more money, or you're just really trying to transition out of a toxic workplace. So anything is better than where you're at. And I think in those kind of like moments of duress, sometimes it's easier to spray and pray than just sit down and say, let me take a more methodical, a more surgical approach.
Yeah, definitely. Because I guess like the inbound, it takes a lot of time, especially if you're posting content on LinkedIn or YouTube. You can go weeks, probably months before even breaking, I don't know, 1,000 views.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. When you're in that position where you need a job like next month, I guess outbound is really the traditional way is really the way to go.
Yeah.
But I mean, it worked out for you. I mean, where you were looking for a new position. I mean, you didn't, I guess, do the spray and pray. You had that strategy of researching the company and methodically sending out a resume that was probably catered to the job description, to the job, and shifting things in your resume that aligns with that company or that role. So, I mean, even that in that kind of way, that approach still takes time as opposed to sending a cookie cutter
Mhm.
resume that isn't tailored and just sending out 30 applications per day or 1,000 per week if you hire a team offshore to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely different ways to think about it, but at the end of the day, one of the like most, I think, uh, rudimentary ways to view it is a numbers game, right? It's like if you're doing cold outreach, like the more resumes you ship out, the more responses you are likely to get. Like at the end of the day, like so it's like quality versus quantity. I just so happen to, I just happen to get like really lucky.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's luck. I think it was determination and the right timing, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you touched on a couple of things, marketing, product marketing, mentioned persona, positioning, ICP. And one of the things that I was actually surprised, but it was a fresh, it was fresh air for me, was when I joined Consensus, you were doing a lot of product marketing things, like competencies, and I was surprised because you didn't hold a product marketing position or title. You were the CX lead, right? And so
Mhm.
I I kind of want to ask, what was your approach to product marketing during that time of CoSense? But I guess before I joined the team, before the expansion of the marketing team, or I guess the
Mhm.
CX team, because that you know, must have been filled with unique challenges and strategies that you maybe come up with and implemented. So can you share like how you navigated product launches or go-to-market strategies and how these experiences, I guess, overall shaped your experience and your product marketing philosophy?
Yeah, yeah. I will say, first things first, I don't know shit. And I was like, hey, you do this thing. I was like, you want me to do what? I don't really know what to do here. I'm very confused. It's time to go to YouTube University. Um, so I definitely came from a place of ignorance, and I definitely made a lot of fumbles that I think like now with like my brief experience, I don't think I would have made or I would make again. But I think like my approach to it was really informed by me being like user centric, community centric, um, and
Mhm.
I was also so that informed my approach and like kind of like what I leaned into and like traditional PMM pillars. I also think I was really fortunate and lucky in that we didn't have this massive budget. We were intentionally trying to be scrappy, and like we were a really small team, so I didn't have to worry about sales enablement, right? Like I didn't have to worry about making any sales enablement collateral trainings. That was like not necessary because I was also the person selling in addition to like our founder.
Mhm.
So at that, we're small enough that it's like if you can't sell it, I don't really know why you're here. Like we don't really have like this massive sales engine to pay somebody to pump out sales enablement content. Um, in addition to that, like we didn't really have the budget for paid marketing. And I know not every PMM necessarily works in like the paid marketing vertical, but I know like in smaller companies, PMMs may be kind of working across both of those fields. So I didn't have to worry about that either. So at that point, really like my objective was we were like kind of like transitioning between kind of like a sales led model to like a product led growth model, and in that kind of transition and us like testing things out and seeing like is this an approach that is more feasible, more scalable, and makes more sense. Oh, did I lose you? Oh, are you
Oh,
back?
yeah.
Okay,
Perfect.
gotta check out that Wi-Fi. But yeah, in that kind of like shift from sales led to product led, um, we were really focused on like brand awareness, brand recognition, and having our names be in the right conversations in the right rooms. So my approach is really again from my like educational background, just being user centric, being community centric. My approach is really like, well, why don't we just like like really make the right relationships with the right people and leverage those relationships to focus on like really just content marketing and focus on one content marketing and then obviously also like go to market strategy. Not like super super deep in go to market because we were still relatively like new, kind of like on the market, so there wasn't a need for like this very comprehensive go to market strategy. It was more so really around like when we have features, when we do announcements, when we do town halls, like just that aspect of it, um,
Mhm.
and like a little bit of like competitive intelligence. So yeah, so that was the approach, and really like the way that I looked at it was seeing like where do our users or our ideal users live, where do they play, where do they go for information, identifying those digital channels and also those channels in real life, and then seeing okay, well, what sandboxes, excuse me, does it make sense for us to play in? Who does it make sense for us to like talk to and be in conversation with? So, are you values aligned? Are you mission aligned? You are cool. Let me reach out. Can we get you on a podcast? Can we get you to co-author some content with us? Is there an initiative that you're running or hosting that we can support in some way, whether it's through advertising it through our channels, through our newsletter, or like in some small monetary way, shape, or form? And I think that was really like the impetus, like seeing our ICP, then within that ICP, finding like really like values and mission aligned people that can help drive the CoSensus brand, and then going to them and seeing what value can we add to you, um, and like really just doing that. And like once that machine started happening, taking every bit of content and trying to slice it like every single way possible. So if what we got was like you know an article, we
Mhm.
can spin that into like a link, several LinkedIn posts. We could spin that into, if it was a shorter article, something much longer form by having someone in the team almost like respond to it. We could spin that into like audio visual content, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And you mentioned community, like community led, which is, it's like a it's a part of co-census, like being community informed, community led, and that's also a big part of being a product marketing manager. So I see where you started to how you're thinking of being community led because of co-census, and then you realize, oh wow, this is like how to do product marketing is just really focus on the user or the buyer, the community itself,
Mhm.
and let that kind of guide you. And I was gonna ask, you also took a course, didn't you? You took a product marketing course from
Oh,
university.
yeah, shout out. Technically, I'm an alumni of Cornell. Technically.
Congratulations.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank
I
you, thank you.
saw that and I was like, is this guy going after my job? Why is he taking a product marketing course and then they hire a product marketer?
No, that was like part of like my professional development plan. I think like I believe in continuous learning. It's actually a value over at Schoolhouse to always be a learner. And I
Mhm.
personally really believe in it. And I was like, I think there's a lot of value to be had here. And it was like it was valuable. It was like super valuable. I think it exposed me to aspects of being a product marketer that I hadn't considered before that I think were definitely things that I I would need to have a better handle on if I wanted to be more senior, be in a more like senior PMM position or PM position.
Mhm.
And like some of those are just like just one example would be like pricing strategy. I mean, the science that can go behind like the science that can go behind pricing strategy from like a psychological perspective, but then also just like from a finance perspective, I was blown away. I was like, oh, I just didn't realize there was that much work kind of like but put into pricing. And I think like it really opened my eyes to like how intentional you can be in like different facets of the role where like there's somebody out there whose title is might be PMM or something else, but like all they do is focus on playing with pricing to optimize like returning customers and profit at the same time. Like that's how deep you can go in that type of work. Um, and like that was just something I just hadn't been exposed to in my role. So yeah, it was really dope. It was really dope.
Yeah, pricing is definitely something that I mean, I was exposed to that when I was in university taking a calculus course. Like you have sometimes have to take a derivative of a function to calculate pricing because something in that equation changes over
Mhm.
time and you need to take the derivative of it. So pricing definitely is something tricky and something more senior related. Um, and what was I going to mention? I was had something a thought of within product marketing. Yeah, I guess like that was definitely a surprise when I saw that you were taking a course on product marketing. I was like, why is this guy taking a product marketing course?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's
I had to make sure I knew that you do what you were doing, but you did. You did. You knew more than
yeah,
me,
that's
which
definitely that's a good point, right? Like you definitely need to be not an expert, but dangerous enough to understand like this is good and that's bad, and being able to distinguish good from bad or like mediocre, and especially during like hiring. The one thing I want to talk about is with product marketing and also urban planners. I don't
Mhm.
know if I told you this, but I was always telling Taisha that when I started to learn more about urban planners and like their discipline and being community centric and informed and talking to communities, I see as a product marketer, I see urban planners as kind of like one and the same. Like you do a lot of research before you enter a community. Like what is the stigma in
Mhm.
that community? Has like have research firms done already like user engagement there, and the community has like a bad taste in their mouth. Uh, that's something that for me, product marketing and urban planners, there's a lot of similarities. You start with the user, the buyer, or urban planning, start with the community, right? And yeah, I that's just something that for me as a product marketer was kind of not astonishing, but it was really interesting to see the similarities and how to communicate to urban planners because it's basically communicating to an urban to a product marketer.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was fascinated by.
Yeah. It
And
definitely. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's interesting because like my formal experience prior to starting like the startup ecosystem, right? To joining the startup ecosystem, excuse me. I worked in like contemporary fashion. Like I did that at undergrad and I did that after I left teaching. Um, it's completely focused, and I was selling like overpriced clothes. It's completely focused on the end user, except the end user is in front of me. Like I'm in the store, they walk into the store, and me and the end user are directly engaging with each other. Um, when I was teaching, the end user is right in front of me, right? Like my students walked into my class and I'm communicating directly with them on a daily basis. And in both examples, um, like I'm talking to my end user and I'm reacting to their wants, their needs, their challenges, the burdens they brought into my classroom or into the store that have nothing to do with me, but that affect how they are in that space in real time. And I'm actively like adjusting my strategy in real time to get to the goal. And the goal with, or to qualify or disqualify, right? With students, it
Mhm.
was my job is to get you to learn X, Y, and Z concept today. Because if you can learn that concept today, I could teach you this concept tomorrow, so on and so forth, to prepare you for high school, and to prepare you to be like a good communicator, right? Because I had like other like kind of goals besides just like academic benchmarks, because that's a separate conversation. With selling clothing, it was I want to qualify or disqualify you as quickly as possible. So if you're disqualified, I can go find somebody qualified, and if you are qualified, I can figure out how I can best serve you to make the sale. Not like how can I get you to spend like thousands of dollars, but how can I make sure that you walk away spending money and you're so happy with your purchase that you're not going to come back and return it. And like
Mm.
I just illustrate those two, like that almost like train of thought, because I think now being in the startup ecosystem and like a more corporate, like being shown like the more corporate side of work, it's like fascinating to me, similar to you, where your realization between like product marketers and urban planners. It's fascinating to me how many people are just like they just sit in like in their cubicles or like in their digital like boxes, and they're like, hey, let's try this thing, and they're throwing ideas at the wall, and nobody talks to users, nobody talks to end users, nobody talks to stakeholders. And there is in 2024 like this precedence of almost like this notion of that still persists of if you build it they'll come. And like I personally just don't prescribe to that. And similar to you, I just find it really interesting when that's kind of like the approach and rhetoric. I don't think it's the best way, but it's just interesting. Like I don't think you need to have 100 customer interviews to like formulate a plan, because I think that's the other side of the extreme. But on this extreme, it's like you don't talk to customers. You just build and iterate in like an echo chamber.
Yeah, it would be nice if, you just can build something and they would come. But unfortunately, we live in the modern age where there's a lot of noise, and it's hard to go back to that way of if you build it, they'll come. Um, you also mentioned something earlier about being your authentic self, and that's something I remember as soon as I sat down and had my first interview with you. Actually, even before you, with who was it? Was it Melissa? Who was the HR person?
Yeah, it was probably Melissa. Yeah,
Melissa.
yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that she mentioned was no, believing in coming and being your authentic self. And I didn't understand what that meant until I had the conversation with you. And you're dropping like S bombs. I was like, oh, okay, they actually mean authentic self. Okay, that's cool. And I so your authentic demeanor during our interview process, like, it definitely left like a lasting impression. My question is, how do you balance being your genuine, authentic self while maintaining some level of professionalism? And also, where does your confidence to come from? Your confidence to, to be able to navigate that in a professional setting.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to mute my Slack. Um, that one's tough. I grapple with that a lot. There's a young entrepreneur, excuse me, out there. His name is Pavel. He has a podcast. His company's Plural podcast. I'm gonna butcher this. It's Quien Tu Eres. And like
Who you
that's what
are?
he talks about. That's all like things he talks about. I've seen him do a talk before, and I'm a big fan of the content. But I mentioned him because if anybody is like interested in digging really deep on this topic, I think he's a great kind of like voice to follow on it. Ooh, Slack. Um, that being said, I think for me the balance is definitely like a bit difficult. I think it's a bit difficult in like this more like corporate setting. I think again going back to like my teaching experience, like I taught in a school. I grew up in Bushwick. I taught in Bushwick. I actually went to the school that I taught at when I was a kid.
Oh wow.
So there was something really, really powerful about me being in the classroom, and like I'm not dropping fucks and shits while I'm teaching, right? Or to students in general. But there was something really powerful about me standing there and being me when these kids are because these like students and these kids are looking and they're like, oh, I see myself reflected in this person in front of me, and that for them was not a commonplace experience. Um, so there was something really powerful about me, deciding like I'm not gonna wear a suit or slacks to work. Like I'm just gonna dress how I dress. Um, and them seeing themselves reflected in that. There was something really powerful about me like using slang in the classroom or AAVE, or improper English, as some folks would say, because they saw themselves reflected in that. So I think for me, it was almost like it came natural because in that first role, it was important for me to show up as myself. Um, that being said, I think it's an everlasting kind of like battle. My approach to it between balancing like how much you be yourself versus like professionalism, and I think for me, it really is like less about a balance of professionalism and authenticity, and more about how do I show up to a space and be myself and allow you to be yourself without any of us disrespecting our respective cultures, because my authentic self and your authentic self, our ideologies might clash. But we don't actually need our ideologies not to clash to effectively work together. Like we're not trying to get married, right? We're not trying to be in a relationship.
Mm.
We're trying to work. So I think like that's the battle for me, and for me, it really is about, at least from my perspective, being an ally to as many people as possible in the space to allow them to be their authentic selves. Because then it's reciprocated, and people are more willing to listen, understand, and empathize with like how you show up. And I think like some really
Mhm.
tangible ways that I try to do that is, I put my pronouns. I put my pronouns in my email and my Zoom name. I put my pronouns everywhere. Um, Pronouns are he, him. I'm a hetero man. But that being said, like that gives space to people for people who maybe don't use like hetero pronouns, um, and are uncomfortable or unsure if this is a place where like they'll be judged for that, or they'll be looked at or viewed differently. Like now, like by me putting my pronouns in there, I'm showcasing like this is a safe space for you to do that. This is a safe space for you to like go ahead and like use whatever pronouns you want. Like you're gonna be good here. Similarly, like I have tattoos. Like I don't cover them up. Like safe space. You have body modifications. Like nobody's gonna be in here like shaming you for your body modifications, unless you got like a botched job or something. We'll probably talk about it behind your back. Um, like it seems. I think like I don't know. It seems silly to say, but I think like show like those small ways in which you allow other people and you show to other people like, yo, you're good here to be you, the more that they allow you to show up and be yourself, because they're just more
Mm.
receptive of it.
Yeah. And going back to when you were a teacher, like being your authentic self in a way is also it helps us. I wouldn't say helps, but if you think about like the students as like a stakeholder, right? Like you're trying to teach them ideas or get across certain things, lectures, and they can't empathize with you because you're not showing up as your authentic self, and they can't relate to you. It's more like that those students aren't going to be, they're not going to pay attention to what you have to teach them, and they're probably going to fall behind in the course load. So by you being your authentic self, you could probably argue you're providing something that other teachers aren't in a way. And it's beneficial for the students for you to show up as your authentic self, just for the students' sake of learning, education, scoring high on the SATs, right? Getting ahead in life, getting into the correct school because their grades reflect really well, all because they're listening to you and they're actively paying attention in their lectures. And I could see that by being your authentic self. Similarly, in like a corporate setting, by you being authentic, people can trust you, and if people trust you, your ideas can probably sway one stakeholder to other stakeholder, right? And you can get buy-in just by being authentic, and then maybe to trust you and your competencies related to the work, of course, but also as a person.
Yeah. And I think like uh I think taking it a step further too, like I think the true can be said in marketing, right? Like my students were consumers, and like for myself and my peers who showed up authentically, regardless of like our like what we look like, where we're from, those are my peers who had the most success with their students. Similar to marketers because they're consumers. As a marketer, like you're trying to reach the consumer, and like it's 2024. Like people don't want to be misled in marketing. They don't want to see like the stiffy, stuffy brand hop on like the new Gen Z trend. Like you're gonna get called out and shit like that. Like similar to marketing, if you're authentic to your brand, your end consumer is going to respect that ultimately. And
Hmm.
I think they're like, I mean, obviously, like they're like the really popular examples, like the Duolingos of the world, who like very much uh like fit like get in that pocket really well. Then there are like on the other side, there's people who are trying to like shift, and their marketing just doesn't line up with their brand because their brand isn't evolving with their marketing. And then I think there's like companies that like are in the middle, really doing the transition in a really interesting way. I think one example is oh gosh, it was IKEA. I think it was a Swedish ad though. I don't think it was here in the States. They ran this like we all know IKEA to be like, this is where you go to get like cheap furniture that doesn't look bad. Like it looks
Hmm.
clean. It's clean, cheap furniture. Um, they they had an ad where like I don't think they've always been this tongue in cheek, but it was a little bit tongue in cheek, where it would show an animal, so like a pet or a cat, with like a broken piece of IKEA furniture, so like a vase or a mug, and it'll have like the name of the piece of furniture or item with the price and like the tagline of like you can afford it. Um, and like I just thought that was like fun and tongue in cheek and like an appropriate way to like shift your marketing for your consumer in the same way that like in a way that's authentic, right? Like they're
Mm,
on like what we as people and we as consumers already say.
yeah. Did you know that IKEA has probably one of the best chocolates I've ever tasted in my life? And it's after the checkout.
I don't eat chocolate, so that's sad for me to
No?
know because I can't do anything with that information. I can tell my
Oh,
wife.
yeah. So for the viewers and for your wife, s- don't go to IKEA at the front. Go straight to the checkout. So basically, enter IKEA from the exit, and you'll
Hmm.
see this aisle of chocolates, and these are like Swedish chocolates, best chocolates I've ever tasted in my life. I don't. Yeah, that's I. I've literally just gone to IKEA for like a whole year before the pandemic, and I would just go to IKEA, park my car, go straight through the exit, and just buy chocolates and hot dogs, and I think they also have pizza as well, and it's affordable too. Like the hot dogs and the pizza, I think it costs less than what you would pay it for at Costco. And so there's a hack. So whoever is listening, thank me later with a chocolate bar.
Go get them glizzies, y'all. Go get them
Yeah.
glizzies.
And so what advice do you have for leaders that want to establish that culture of being authentic and showing up as your authentic self, and then also giving space for others and being an ally? And could you actually kind of, I guess, define what being an ally is and what does it look like in the workspace?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the latter because I think it's more tangible. The other one might be a bit more theoretical. I think like one practical example is right, like you putting your pronouns in like your username, your emails. I think using like gender inclusive language. Those are like some particular ways in which you can be an ally to like people who identify as queer or LGBTQ. Um, I think like on the flip side, right? So like that's one way that I try to be an ally. That's really practical.
Hmm.
Um, I think on the flip side for um, people that maybe are like people that are white or identify as white. Um, one way to be an ally that like I've appreciated is like understanding, which I think maybe yeah, understanding. Maybe this is just like a me thing because of my background. But like really understanding like where language comes from. I think like one thing that really shows allyship to me is when people understand that like all of this like popular Gen Z lingo, or not all of it, many of it, much of it, excuse me, is AAVE. And like historically, like, and for those that don't know, AAV is African American vernacular English. So it's slang that you probably have heard, slang that you've probably heard black people say. And it's dubbed AAVE because it's a way of communicating that is typically found in black neighborhoods and black communities, that where a lot of it goes mainstream, and when it goes mainstream, it's attributed to like a generation. So like, oh, that's a millennial thing, or that's a Gen Z thing. So I do really appreciate when people like correctly categorize that language as like belonging to like the black community or belonging to like the queer community, because a lot of like popular language that we see came from like queer communities, particularly black queer communities and or black communities, right? Like I don't know what do kids say now? They say shit like, "Oh, you ate that." Queer people have been saying you ate that for a long time. Like they've been
Yeah.
saying that like you ate that for a long time. Um, or like I think maybe Gen Z has Riz. They can keep Riz. Um, but other examples like gosh, of course, examples leave my mind now.
Cooked. There's I've been hearing, oh, he's cooked or am I cooked?
Oh yeah,
Which
that like I was saying that when I was a kid. Like that's not,
really,
and I'm 30. Yeah, I'm 30. I've been saying that since I was a kid. That's
I've
not like,
never heard that.
yeah, like that's just not like, that's not like a Gen Z thing. That's something that I think is, you know, more of being said in communities of color, and particularly communities of color in like urban neighborhoods. So I think
Mm,
like those are some ways you can be an ally. And then from like the leadership perspective, I think like one, actively being an ally. Um, sorry, I'll go back really to allyship because I have one other example. Um, I think like making sure that you're trying to be inclusive of everybody's like respective like boundaries outside of work without actually requiring them to have those boundaries outside of work. And what I mean by that is kind of like practically think considering like work hangouts or team bonding experiences, right? Like don't make them all happy hours. If you make them all happy hours, you're inherently excluding people that don't drink, people that have kids, people that take care of a loved one, um, because like their commitment to you ended at 5. Like when everything is a happy hour, you are inherently like being biased and leaning towards people with like less familial commitments, who like
mm,
lean on the younger side and who don't have substance abuse uh, struggles in their life. Make it more inclusive. Like make your team bondings and your team outings during work hours, and that in of itself is a way to be an ally to like all of those groups, right? Like to
mm,
parent, people who are caretakers, and people who may have struggled with like substance abuse. Like make your events like alcohol free, and like have a wide variety of events. Like I think like that's another really tangible way to be an ally. And then for leadership, I think like one, you got to walk the walk. Um, yeah, I think you just gotta like really walk the walk and like really encourage people to not be afraid to like speak on what they may need to feel comfortable.
Yeah, and that's something you're really good at. You're really good at letting me know that if I need something, and if there's a roadblock or there's any way that if there's anything that I need from you, I mean, constantly there is I would always receive that feedback from you, and that was really helpful. That let me know that you're someone I can depend on, in like to move things around or ask for things within the company, and to make sure that I had what I needed to be successful in my role. Um, yeah, and also I was gonna say something with that, but I completely forgot. Are there any common challenges that you face when trying to, cultivate that safe space?
Um, it's definitely a little bit. My org is a similar size, but I'm more in an individual contributor role now, as opposed to like leadership. Um, I think so I provide that context just to say like that's not necessarily like a part of like the work that's expected of me, but it still is something that I take pride in like actively working towards. Um, and I think like common challenges I face is are just that people want to be inclusive to the people to the groups that are in front of them, right? Like I think I think what I've like, and as an example, right? Like nobody's like, oh, don't worry about the like nobody's like worried about like the fact that all of our hangouts are going to be happy hours. If nobody here is a parent, nobody here has a history of like substance abuse, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
They're just like, what's the big deal? Everybody comes to happy hour all the time. We have 100% attendance and people have a ton of fun and no issues happen. And I think people wait to put into practice something that can be inclusive until somebody actively benefits from it. And I think that is a huge L. That's a huge L. It's a huge miss. I think if companies really, really care about creating an inclusive culture for their workforce and for their team, you should be walking that walk from the jump. Like you shouldn't need to have a new parent on the team for you to consider having work events during the day. You shouldn't need to have somebody who doesn't use like hetero pronouns in the team to make it like a team wide initiative to say like use your pronouns, guys. Like put the pronouns on the emails and on your Slack name. That's like norm. When you introduce yourself, use your pronouns. I think when you wait until there's somebody directly there to benefit from that, like great for that person, they get to benefit. But I think that's ultimately like an L because you're not actively trying to build inclusive practices for as many people as possible. You're only doing it for the people who are in the room.
Yeah, that is actually really true. I think that was one of the first things I did was on Slack, uh, my pronouns, right? I think I'm not even sure if I have my pronouns on here because I just see it just says on my side it says it has a star and it just says you. So I don't even know if my pronouns are showing right now.
Same.
Oh, that's funny. But James, we're at time, and so I want to thank you again for coming on this podcast. It means a lot to kind of dive into your experiences, especially when cultivating like a safe space and being authentic. 'Cause that's one of the things I've tried to carry over in my time, and as I progress in product marketing, is being authentic, true to myself, and dance in between this line. And I couldn't think of a better person to bring on and to ask these questions than you. So thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, man. I appreciate being here.